kita akan mengundang Charles Esche kali ini untuk membicarakan apakah itu maju kena mundur kena. Tentu saja kita di Indonesia sudah sangat familiar dengan term maju kena mundur kena. Lalu bagaimana itu bisa menjadi tema dari seorang Charles Esche untuk Jakarta Biennale 2014 ini. Terima kasih. 2015.
Selamat siang, and thank you to everybody for coming today. I apologize, I'm speaking in English. I hope it's okay for most of you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mia and Ade, the foundation, Vicky, who's the managing director, who's here, everybody who's been supporting this process so far, also all the funders, some have been right here as well, to really try, hopefully, to build a project, or to take in a way the Jakarta Biennale, which has a long history, in some ways going back all the way to the 1970s, to take it to another level. I think that's the attempt that the foundation want to make, as was said very clearly, and also what I hope I can contribute to. I want to talk about three things in brief. The first thing is to think about the structure or the nature of what a biennale is in the first place. The second thing will be to say a little bit about Maju Kena Mundur Kena, and finally to talk a little bit about the process that Ade has outlined, just to add a couple of thoughts on that. So the first thing is the biennale itself, and I think it's interesting to understand what the potential is of this form called the Biennale. It's a form that goes back to the 19th century, actually. It was invented in Western Europe. But the Biennale that we know today is almost completely different from the Biennale of those days. What happened specifically in the early 90s, after the end of the Cold War and also the start of the spread of the internet, the old idea of the Biennale, which was basically like the Olympics, a sort of national competition with who was the best artist from the best nation state, that basically stopped functioning in any meaningful way. It still functions like that a bit in Europe, but that's mainly because Europe is quite slow in adopting the contemporary world. But elsewhere, and particularly in Asia, a new form was generated in Shanghai, in Guangzhou, in different places, also later in Singapore and also here. An idea of a biennale which was not so much a nation-state competition, but a way in which the public could, what we might call, come to terms with the complexity of the world, which sounds a very grand statement. But the idea might be that through art, through culture, we can avoid the divisions that politics or religion or economics creates in our society, in what we could call a global society, a society which is much more interconnected than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And in that society, culture can be a means to try to understand each other, to try to feel empathy. And why should culture be the one thing that might do that? Well, culture is a way to strengthen the imagination, we all know that. It's a way that you can start to imagine things that don't exist, and by imagining things that don't exist, you can start to make them happen. But art, particularly, all forms of art, literature and music as well, has one other additional aspect, which builds empathy, builds a relationship between people. And it's this idea that not only do you use your own imagination, but you try to imagine the imagination of someone else. And you try to stand in the shoes of somebody else. If you look at an artwork, the activity that you're doing is trying to imagine somebody else's imagination, which is an extraordinary thing to do if you think about it, because imagination seems to be a very private idea. You know, like imagination is our own, we all have our own imagination. But through art, we get a chance to see and to feel the imagination of somebody else. And that can build an understanding, which is an understanding that overcomes economic, political, religious division. And I think that was seen, again, particularly in Asia, it was seen as a means to try to give people, as many people as possible, the chance to come to terms with the world that was changing. And through coming to terms with that world that was changing, to be able to have more agency, more possibility to act in that world. And I think we've seen the results over the last 20 or 30 years with the development of many aspects of visual culture, of visual art, but also the relationship between art and society. And that relationship is, of course, at the heart of the exhibition. So we moved to thinking about Maju Kena Mundur Kena. It's a term that some of you will be familiar with, I think, from a film from the 1980s, and it basically describes this idea of neither forward nor back. And it feels like you're stuck in a way. It feels like you're sort of caught in an impossible situation. But what we want to think about it is that actually being caught in this impossible situation, what you have to do is focus on the present moment. The danger of always looking back or looking forward is, on the one hand, you turn to nostalgia. Things were always better in the past. We must keep our traditions. The most important thing is to maintain what we had. Or on the other hand, by looking forward, you postpone any change for some unknown utopia. Things will always be better in the future. It doesn't matter how bad it is now, because it will be better in the future. And politicians of all kinds use both nostalgia and utopia as a means to basically deceive what is going on in the present. And so what we wanted to do was to identify those artists, and art is a good way to do this. Yeah? Identify those artists who could, if you like, take the temperature of the present moment. So to try and live in the present. And not only live in the present, but also act in the present. To do something about the situation today. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, but today. And so this title, Maju Kena Mundur Kena, becomes this way of identifying an exhibition that is firmly in the present. And that tries from the present to speak about what we can do, what artists can do, but also what communities can do. So a lot of the projects in the Biennale and also outside in the city of Jakarta, and even, we hope, in a small way in Surabaya, so actually to extend the Jakarta Biennale out in a small way to Surabaya, that these projects will be about current conditions and how we can look at them. Now often when we look at those conditions, they can seem very problematic and very difficult to get into the situation of complaint and critique. But actually what we want to look at more is the idea of small victories that you can win in the present. So not to have the large utopian ideal of revolution or great change, nor to say let's go back to the 14th century where everything was better, but actually to say what can we win today? What little victory can we win today? And I think what we found in working together is that there are artists that are really engaged and concerned with that idea. How can, if you like, how can we imagine the world of today in a different way, and how can we act so that we are already in a better world? The final point I'd like to make is about the group itself, and we have three of my 6 colleagues from all over Indonesia. Ade spoke a lot about the process, but I just wanted to add my own word of thanks to that for the last weeks, last months when we've been working together. It's easy to say that it's a genuine exchange, but I mean that sincerely, in the sense that I have learned a huge amount, and I think I've learned much more than they have learned. But in that process, we've actually been able to develop this idea, to develop this concept of being in the now and acting in the now. And we've also come across many interesting artists from all over Indonesia. So because of their knowledge, I've had access to artists in Aceh, in Sulawesi, in East Java, that I would never conceivably be able to know about. So it's been really quite a wonderful collaboration, and I hope and I think it will lead to a wonderful exhibition. And that's obviously the objective, because in the end, everything that we do It's not about us, it's not about the foundation, it's not even about the funders, but it's actually about the public, the people who come to this exhibition, and hopefully will be able to imagine the imagination of other people, and therefore to understand and to live with the world a little bit better than they can before.